Hey, what's going on? My name is Chris Phillips. Welcome to Elevate Your Leadership Podcast. Man, we have a very special guest today. We've got someone that is a leader of leaders. Not only is he a leader of leaders, but he coaches and trains and develops other people to be leaders of leaders. He coaches and trains and develops organizations to have intentional leadership development processes within their organization. He's a father. He's a former church planter, former pastor. And like I said, he is a leader of leader across many different genres that we could talk about today. We have none other than Mac Lake of Multiply Group. Man, Mac is one of the best leaders that I know, and you are going to be very blessed with what he brings to the table today. He's talking about what he's learned about leadership from other leaders across the country. He's talking about the good things that he's learned, as well as the things that you need to avoid as a leader. And he really hones in on what it means to be a dad and leading kids and what that means to him now in his current life and how he walks that leadership process as well, too. So I think you're going to be really blessed with today's episode. I hope you enjoy it, and I know I can't wait to dive into it. So welcome our guest, Mac Lake, to today's podcast. Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Elevate Your Leadership with Adam Pelham. And man, we have a special guest today I'm really excited about. One of my favorite leaders, Mac, not just in leadership within the church context, but you're one of my favorite leaders overall. The way you love your family, the way you lead your family, the way you've church planted, the way you've been at churches across the country, the way you invest in church planters and leaders, all around your general leadership components that you give people are incredible. And so you're one of my favorite leaders, I promise you that.
Chris, thank you so much.
Yeah, man. But none other than Mac Lake, Multiply Group, Leadership Pipeline. There's nobody that thinks about leadership probably more than you. It's kind of your job, right? And I guess you would probably even say more of your calling. And so your calling is to focus on leadership and help other people lead. And this podcast is all about leadership. So it's leadership within the church, yes, but leadership as a school teacher, as a business worker, as a dad, as a mom, as a son. You know, I want this to be something that we drive forward in every aspect of our life. And obviously, as a follower of Christ, I think one of the greatest leaders we can even look at, regardless of my point of view on whether I believe it to be true or not, is Jesus Christ. Because 2,000 years later, we're still talking about him. We're still reading his books. We're still debating the things that he said, which means that that's some strong leadership that we have. And so, man, Mac, I've got a couple of questions for you that, like, honestly, I would love to just call you and ask these anyways. And so I thought, okay, if I'm going to ask Mac anything, these are leadership questions I want to ask him. And so you answer, you pour into us, you encourage us. And so thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, man, it's an honor, Chris. Thank you for this chance.
Hey, you talk with more leaders than probably anybody around the country. You came today, and you were investing in leaders in the Front Range of Colorado, right? Denver and Fort Collins and Colorado Springs. What do you find the most successful leaders are doing? Because you're around leadership all the time. So if you had some like common traits that some of the most successful leaders you see, what is it that they're doing that other people are not doing?
Man, good question. The first thing that comes to mind is they're constantly learning. Constantly learning. Yeah. If you look at the life of Christ, when he was 12 years old, one of the first episodes we see after his birth, and we only see this one little episode of his childhood. We don't know anything else until he's 30. Yeah. But at 12 years old, Luke says in Luke chapter 2, verse 40, that Jesus grew. And that Greek word is oxano. It means to it's like the growth of a plant. A plant doesn't grow itself. It just grows, no effort of its own. It just grows because of the environment that's in it. But then he goes on to talk about Jesus goes to the temple. His parents lose him. He goes to the temple.
We've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. I've lost my kids several times. Right. And so he's sitting at the feet of the most theologically trained men in the country. Passover was over.
That's good.
But those rabbis and theologically trained guys, they would stay afterwards and sit in the temple and discuss theology and discuss the Torah. Yeah. Jesus wanted to be there.
Yeah, that's good.
And the text says that he sat with them and asked questions. Now, that was a form of learning and teaching.
Yeah.
So sometimes people say, well, he was teaching them. No, he was learning with them,
Yeah.
and he was learning from them. And so Luke goes on and tells that story, but Luke 2:52 says, it reiterates, Jesus grew.
Yeah.
But it's a different word. It's a different Greek word.
Wow.
This Greek word means to take effort and hammer out. It was
That's
used
good.
to speak of a metal worker that hammered out hot iron.
Wow.
So Luke sandwiches this story of Jesus grew because of,
Yeah.
just natural influence on him, God's influence on him, but he also grew because he put effort into it.
Wow.
I won't name them, but I can name some of the best countries and best leaders in the country that I know,
Yeah.
and they are just rabid learners.
Wow.
Constantly learning.
Yeah.
Can't get enough of it. They're hungry, hungry, hungry.
I heard a guy say one time, he said leaders that aren't learners have a short shelf life
So
because
true.
the world is ever changing. Some of the principles are the same,
Yeah.
but the way in which they come out, the way in which they unfold are different. I used to have a pager. I'll be, I'm over the age of 40.
Yeah.
So I had a pager, and I wasn't a drug dealer. That's, it's like there. And so it's like, but I don't use a pager anymore because we have smartphones. And the way that we communicate, we still communicate.
So good.
But I need to unfold and learn new technology in order to communicate the most effective. And so, yeah, leaders that are not learners have a short shelf life.
They're still
And
carrying pagers around.
They're still carrying pages, yeah. And I know some of those guys.
I know some of those guys too. You know
Man,
what?
that's
And
good.
there were several years ago, I was teaching Leadership Pipeline, and you were so kind earlier to say that, I study that a lot,
Yeah.
and I do. But I was on site, and I was teaching a Leadership Pipeline. 8 hours that day, and I finished teaching. I went and got my car, and I was driving away, and the Holy Spirit just convicted me.
Wow.
And said, Mac, you did not say anything today that you have never said before.
Wow.
Everything you said today, you have said before.
Yeah.
I got so convicted because I realized, oops, the very thing I love the most and passionate, it's easy to start coasting.
Man, that's good.
Start easy. And so I said, God, here's my deal. I'm a 401 level in my learning on leadership development. I have studied a lot.
Yeah.
But God, I'm going to reset my 401 level is now a 101 level, and I'm going to regrow to a new 401 level, which means I have to talk to different people, read different things, ask different questions, expose myself to different experiences in order to continue to grow. You grow to a certain point, and it's easy. It's just like weightlifting. You can beef up pretty quick.
Yeah.
But then that next level of growth takes a whole lot. You have to hammer it out.
Yeah.
It takes a lot more effort.
Man, a pastor friend of mine, Andy Wood, we were just talking about him. One of the things he said recently in the setting that we were in, he said, we start to memorialize some things, to make some monuments in our leadership or in our churches or in our organizations. He said, and when we do that, what we typically do is we're coming off of maintenance mode, and we go to start making memorials and monuments out of these things. He said, and what we're doing is we get frustrated and distracted, so we just ask God to do the same thing he's always done, and we're limiting the creativity of God. And he said, man, ask for a fresh new work. Ask for something new. Why ask God to do the same thing he's already done? Why don't you ask him to do it more? Why don't you ask him to do it new, do it fresh? And that's exactly what you're talking about is, I can give the same talk over and over and over and over and over again, but why don't I ask God to give a fresh new work for a different people in a different group and meaning and impact? That's really good. So learning, that's be a constant learner. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so you've been around and thinking about leadership for a really long time. How long have you been in and around the leadership world? What would you put a guesstimation on it? Where you're intensely focusing on leadership?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I planted my church in 1997.
Yeah.
And a couple of years before that, I was getting very passionate about leadership development. So I would say 95.
Yeah.
1995 is when I really began to get a passion.
So you're coming on to 30 years of consistently focusing on it. Yeah. What are some other characteristics? We know that the things have changed in leadership, right? So fresh new work, we're walking through these things. We want God to do a fresh new thing. But what has been necessary to be a good leader? So a lot has changed in leadership over the times. A lot has stayed the same though, right? Learning is one of those. Is there any other thing that you would say, man, as the things ebb and flow, if you can stay with this, learning would be one of them. What are some other things that if you can focus on and ride this wave, you're going to be increasing your leadership capacity no matter what changes and comes our way?
Integrity.
Oh, man.
Obviously, but let me take that a step further. Because I don't want to say integrity because, I have to mention that because it's got to make the list.
Yeah.
It's easy to make small compromises. It's easy. And we can make small compromises and take shortcuts and not look at it as taken away from our integrity.
Yeah.
But when you walk with integrity, you got to make sacrificial choices, large and small. And sacrificial choices cause you to grow.
Wow.
They cause you to grow.
Yeah.
They push you. I don't want to confront this situation with one of my leaders. Man. It's a small thing. I can let it go.
Yeah.
And by letting that small thing go, I'm compromising my integrity.
Wow.
And so I have to address those things.
Gosh.
And that's hard.
Man.
And so I would say really looking at your character and saying, am I living with integrity?
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. So I was talking to somebody one day and they said, hey, can you do X for me?
Yeah.
And I said, no, I'm sorry, man. I'm so busy. I don't have time. I'm so busy. I don't have time. And I walked away and the Holy Spirit grabbed me and said, you just lied.
Wow.
I didn't lie. I don't have time. I don't have time.
Man.
He said, no, that you didn't tell him the truth.
Wow.
You have time. The honest answer would be, hey, thank you for asking, but that is not a priority that in my life right now, so I'm going to have to say no to you.
Yeah.
But I compromise integrity by saying, I'm too busy. I don't have time. No, I have time. I have time for the things that God wants me to do.
Yeah.
And so that's more of an honest answer.
Can I tell you something too? I just walked through some really tough challenges as a leader, as a senior leader, that I wouldn't want to walk through again, but I know I will. Yeah. And it was the first time I had to walk through these types of situations. And I did grow as a leader. I felt better as a leader for having going through one of the most challenging things I've walked through as a leader ever. And you're exactly right. I didn't want to. There was an easier way to do it, but I couldn't because I prayed about it. You know, God was like, you've got to do this. And so when I did that, it was hard to walk through it. But on the outside of it, looking back in, it was still challenging and it was still hard. But man, I feel like a better leader for having to go through it like I did. So you're exactly right. It's like, it's not even to make it easier. It's not even to do those things, but it's to grow as a leader. Walk through the challenging things. Don't take the shortcuts because it actually makes me a better leader and it keeps my integrity. Man, that's good. So yeah, integrity is one. And obviously this is the world that we live in now, right? Where we're seeing a lack of integrity that are causing a lot of people. And that's across all genres of leadership, not just church world, but integrity, from leaders as CEOs of companies and Fortune 500 companies and all these types of things. That's a component that, is really missing the mark. And,
small compromises condition your soul for larger compromises.
Wow. That's so good.
That's so good.
Yeah, man, that's good. Adam, you got any questions? I don't want to take everything over from you. Yeah.
No. Man, so myself and the reason why, for me, what I am excited about for this podcast and what we want to do for other leaders as well is we say all the time, hey, you can lead where you are, no matter age, no matter where you're at. Like God has given you an area to lead out in. And so as a young leader like myself, man, I just want to hear from your thoughts. What are some effective ways to lead where you are? Because I think a lot of young leaders like myself, they see where they want to go. They see their future. They want to get to a certain spot, but they don't know where to lead where they're at, how to get to that spot. They can maybe get impatient at times, like, man, I want to be the guy right now. What are some things that young leaders can do in the space and where they're at right now?
Yeah. For young leaders, one of the things I really advise them as they're leading, don't try to prove yourself. Don't try to prove yourself. When you're trying to prove yourself, it's evident to those around you.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're just trying to validate your identity is what you're doing, and so you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Be who you are. Be honest about who you are. So anytime I hire somebody new, one of the very first things I do with them is I sit down and I say, okay, I want you to know who I am. Here are my strengths. Here are my weaknesses. Here's my leadership system that I'm going to utilize with you. Here are ways for you to confront me when you're uncomfortable with something I'm asking you to do, or you're upset with me, or you've been offended by something I've done. Here's how you confront me. I give them simple little, here's how to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think as a young leader, if you can learn those type of disciplines, when you're leading people, say, hey, here's who I am, and here's how I operate, and you have the freedom to confront me on things, and don't try to prove yourself.
Yeah, that's so good. I think of, don't talk about it, be about it, right? Don't talk about yourself all the time, but like good leaders will see other good leaders. If you're putting the work in, if you're going after it, I think I was listening to a podcast the other day, like people will see that. Yeah. And also too, I think for young leaders, it's like, man, we got a lot of time right now. I'm 26 years old. I don't have a wife or kids right now. Like, put in some of that extra time. Be humble. Keep your head down and grind a little bit. That's so good.
The young leaders get they want to prove themselves. They
Right.
want to go to the next
So much.
level.
Yeah.
So much that they don't focus on elevating others. They try to elevate themselves. And so then the second thing I would say for young leaders, or for any leader really, but ask questions.
Yeah,
that's good.
Ask questions. We were talking about Andy Wood just a minute ago.
Yeah.
And I told you, Andy's one of the best leaders I've ever been around.
Absolutely.
And when I would fly into San Francisco, every once in a while, Andy and I would go to the gym and work out. And he always had a notepad with him with a set of questions he was asking me and writing down answers.
Yeah.
And so I was with Justice Coleman, Pastor Justice, in L.A. one day, and we found out we both knew Andy.
Nice.
Took a selfie. He took a selfie of me and him, sent it to Andy, and Andy replied with one line: ask big questions. Wow. So that's what I would say to young leaders. It's amazing how many young leaders have reached out to me at times and said, hey, could I get 30 minutes with you? Could I go to lunch with you, coffee with you, something?
Yeah.
And they show up and they talk the whole time, or they don't have any questions.
Man.
And I'm embarrassed because I've done the same thing. Dr. Howard Hendricks was one of my heroes.
Oh, wow.
And it was hard to get on his calendar. And when you got on his calendar, it was 15 minutes.
Wow.
I went into his office, sat down, talked for 14 minutes.
Oh, man.
And with 1 minute left, he said, well, Mac, you got 1 minute left. Do you have any questions for me?
Wow. Man. That hit.
Yeah. It hit hard. Yeah.
Wow.
When I meet, I'm 3 years into church planting journey, 3.5 years, but involved, in our kind of network with our church planters, and I'll meet with any of them. I block time to do it, because it's a heartbeat and a passion of mine. There's nothing more that drives me crazy when I do go to meet with one and they don't bring a notebook or anything.
Yeah.
And they may even ask questions, but it even looks like I didn't come ready to actually hear anything. I didn't come ready, prepared to learn anything or take anything away. And then what's even more frustrating is when they go away and then you ask them to do something that they didn't do anything. And I'm like, well, you didn't have a notebook, you didn't have an iPad, you didn't have a phone, you didn't do anything. And so you're right. I mean, asking those questions and being engaged, man, there is nothing better than, the aspects of being inquisitive. Yeah. And I was telling you about my youngest son. He's one of the most inquisitive kids I've ever been around. And that's why, God's using him in a real special way, is because he's asking questions constantly. Now, they're 9-year-old questions right now, but they are big 9-year-old questions. And I'm thinking, man, you keep this up and God's going to do a whole lot through you.
That's so good.
So you travel a ton. And I was in medical sales for 10 years prior to a call to ministry. And so serving in medical sales, the last year of medical sales, I traveled 12 weeks out of the year. And now this is before we had a ton of kids. Our youngest was real young. We had another one, that was just born. So we were like 2 and newborn at the time. But traveling is hard, and leading while traveling is really hard. And so just a practical question for you, because Mac, I know you don't do anything that you do for show or anything else, but like people can see that you love your family. You love being a dad. You love being a granddad. You for sure love being a husband. You love being a friend. You can tell that in all the stories that you tell, the friendships that you have. While you're traveling, while you're so busy, how do you make sure that you're leading well in the home and in those relationships? What are some things that you do that helps you lead well while you're traveling and having such a busy oriented schedule?
Man, such a good question. because my calling has, part of my calling is traveling.
Yeah.
I don't like being away. Cindy's my best friend. Cindy's my wife. She's my best friend. And, I tell her all the time, one night away from you is a loss that I can't regain.
Wow.
And I don't like any night that I'm away from her. So one of the things with her is I try to take her with me.
Yeah.
Now she won't go with me to Springfield, Illinois, or Bamberg, South Carolina.
That's right. She might come to Denver, Colorado.
Denver sounds better.
right.
She'll
Sure.
come to Denver, LA. She loves going there.
Yeah.
But one of the things we do when we do those trips, I do something called one-day dates.
Yeah.
And so one-day date is we'll take an extra day, and sometimes extra 2 days, and we explore that city together. And so it's just capitalizing on the fact that I do get to travel around the country, and I can take her with me, and we get to reap the rewards of that.
Yeah.
And so we'll be in a city and say, okay, let's go find a local coffee shop. Let's go find a local health food restaurant and eat there.
Yeah.
And let's see if we can get 10 miles of walking in. Let's go, special sites. And we just love doing that.
It's fun.
And we'll do one-day dates. Oh, goodness gracious, anywhere from 6 to 8 times a year.
Wow.
So that really, really
That's when you're
helps
traveling.
in our relationship.
And that's good.
And then, weekends off.
Yeah.
Weekends off. I'll confess I wasn't always good at that.
Yeah.
And I started to get better when we had grandkids, and which was 7 years ago. But I got a whole lot better at it during COVID.
Yeah.
COVID exposed to me that I was running too tight.
Yeah.
I was running too wired. I wasn't really slowing down.
Yeah.
And so during COVID, I would actually take 2 days off. And because I usually I would work on Saturday and take Sunday off.
Feels good.
Yeah. And then I realized, wow, this is not healthy for my soul.
Yeah.
And so giving my family time, quality time on the weekend, and it takes one day just to decompress a little bit from the week.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And isn't it amazing what God can still do in your resting days?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
I'd taken on One Church in Multiplications last year. I did not Sabbath well. Not at all. I was awful at it. Borderline workaholic, and all this kind of stuff. And going into that, I said, if I'm going to lead healthy and still have a wife and a family and kids that love me and the church and everything afterwards, I'm going to need to Sabbath through this. And so I just said, I'm going to regularly Sabbath. And now sometimes that gets in the way, of certain things and funerals and stuff like that. I feel healthier than I've ever felt over the last year, as busy as this has been. And I guarantee you it's because I've dedicated myself to making sure I Sabbath regularly.
So good.
And so that's just, for me, it was one of those, I was not doing it. I have a dashboard that I look at my health with working out, family time, Sabbathing. And then I had a mentor of mine, Steve Gaines at Bellevue in Memphis, Tennessee. He told me, he said, what's lasted for me in ministry this long is I dialogue daily with my wife. I date her weekly, and then we depart often together. So dialoguing daily, date weekly, and departing often. And so we've had that rhythm for 7-8 years in our marriage, and it's been one of the easiest things for us to continue to love one another and lead well there. Yeah.
When we had young kids, one of the things, or kids at home, one of the things that we put into practice that we learned from that program, Growing Kids God's Way, was couch time.
Oh, yeah.
And so every day have couch time and let your kids know, hey, mom and dad are having couch time. This is our private time. We're going in the other room or whatever, and we're gonna talk, and we cannot be interrupted. This is our quality time, and we're going to be better parents for you if we have strong relationship.
It's good.
And for us, through travel, through raising kids and all those sort of things, that was always a priority because we knew for us to really parent our kids, we didn't want to wake up one day and not know each other.
Yeah.
So
good.
Yeah, it's those type of rhythms you have to build into your life.
Oh yeah. So we're talking good leadership here, but I would imagine someone that travels to a ton of places to talk leadership, you've also seen some poor leadership. Not asking you to call out names or anything like that, but what is it? So I think we can learn, right? I've always heard the phrase, chew the meat, spit out the bones, right? And so you can sit in any setting with a good or a bad leader, chew the meat, spit out the bones, and recognize characteristics or things and say, this is what I need to do. By the way, this is probably something I don't need to do. What are some things that you've seen characteristic-wise from poor leaders that you would say, hey, if you're going to elevate your leadership, avoid these things in your life?
Yeah, a couple things come to mind. trust God.
It's good.
Trust God. Stop making excuses.
Yeah.
Stop accepting things for the way they are. And really begin to say, God, what do you want to do in and through my life? And believe he can do it.
Yeah.
I'm just shocked at how quickly Christian leaders can come up with excuses.
Wow.
And I think we've become so conditioned
Yeah.
to not ask and not believe and just readily accept.
Wow.
My son Brandon, and we were talking about him earlier, Brandon Lake, and he's got a lot of songs that people know.
He's doing all right.
He's
right
all
now.
right.
He's doing okay for himself.
If you haven't heard him, you probably need to go listen to him. Come on. Yeah.
But I tell him, I said, son, your life and the words of your songs challenge my faith.
Wow.
Your faith is growing my faith.
Oh, wow.
For a 61-year-old to tell his 30-year-old that,
Wow.
I looked at him one day and I said, I got to tell you something. I said, when you were a kid, I always told you, I love you. I've told you I love you for years, you know that. And then, as you grew older and older, I began to say, man, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. But guys, I looked at him about 3 years ago.
Wow.
And I said, Brandon, I'm about to tell you something that I never even anticipated as a dad that I would ever say. I admire you.
Wow.
I admire the man you are.
That's good.
I admire the dad you are. I admire the husband you are. And I admire your faith, and your faith stretches my faith.
Yeah.
I'm older. I'm looking for young guys who believe that what Jesus said, he remains true to.
Bold
right.
faith.
God, bold faith. That was one. I don't know if the Sin Network training.
Yeah.
When I wrote that, the one of the key competencies in that training.
Yeah.
There's a whole 4-hour session developed around this.
Wow.
Lead with a bold faith that takes prayerful risk.
Yeah.
That was the competence. 4 hours of training on that.
Yeah.
And we used to tell them, guys, if you don't lead with a bold faith, your people can't live with a bold faith.
Yeah.
If you don't lead with a bold faith in your home, your family's not going to live with a bold faith.
Wow.
And so I think sometimes we get scared to trust God because we don't want to make God look bad.
Yeah. Right.
What if he doesn't show up?
Yeah.
And so I might be believing in private for some things, and I think God's going, you know what? Once you believe in public, I'll show up.
Wow.
If you're keeping this awful private, and if you're keeping it private, I don't know. You might be say you're believing me for something, but if you're not making that public, I don't know that you're believing it.
Wow.
Wow. I
Man.
love that.
And a mutual friend of ours, Parker Manuel, he's got some of the boldest faith of anybody I know.
He does.
I'm like, Parker, you're borderline crazy.
He is borderline
But
crazy.
when I go through, I'm like, you're not. You're just bold faith oriented. And I don't have as much of that because I'm structure, strategy, implementation, efficiency, these types of things. And it challenges me. And, honestly, you said that about, Brandon. I was telling you my son, idolizes him. And those songs do, Spirit, rest on us. Don't just come and show up, but rest on me right now. It's stuff like that it's like, yeah. And honestly, it's like, you've always heard the adage of we pray prayers that we could probably have solutions for and do on our own. Yeah. And God is sitting there going, well, if you'll just pray for something that only I can do, I'd probably show up. And so, that's great.
There's an exercise I do with my team, and we're about to do it, in the upcoming year here.
Yeah.
Is, hey guys, let's set our goals. All right. So we'll set our goals. And now, is there room for faith in these goals? And so we'll stretch them a little bit, have a little God room in there.
Yeah.
But then the other thing we do is say, all right, let's come up with 2 to 3 dangerous prayers.
Oh, man.
That if this happens, only God.
Yeah.
Only God.
That's so good.
And that's, in 1 year, I set a goal, and it was one of those dangerous prayers.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine, a guy on my board, looked at me and said, it's too small. I went, no, this is impossible. What I said is, this is an only God moment right here, right? He said, I think you need to double that.
Wow.
I said, it was Tim Wheat.
Wow.
I said, Tim, I can't double that. And he said, let's double it.
Man.
And so I did. I doubled the goal, and God did it.
Wow.
Blew my mind.
That's incredible.
Could not believe it.
All right, last question. If you're talking to a leader, leaders listening, there's someone right now sitting in their car, they're on a run, they're working out, they're doing whatever, and he's just going, man, what can I practically do? It's good, bold faith, that sounds awesome. I don't know that I can have bold faith right away. It's good to be a learner. That's hard to do something learning, right away. I want to go. I can step into that. But if he's listening and says, I want to do 1, 2, 3 things practically today that I can jump into elevating my own leadership so that I can elevate the leadership around the people around me. What would you tell that person if he's asking you to for a couple of practical things to elevate their leadership?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say, Psalm 139, 24, 25, David says, search me, try me, see if there's any wicked way in me.
It's good.
Lead me in your way in righteousness. What David is doing there, that word search in Hebrew, it was the same word that was used of sending out spies into the land. So David's prayer, this is a phenomenal prayer. It's, God, I want you to spy out the land of my heart, bring me an intelligence report, and show me where I need to grow. Ooh. So that's the first thing I would do. I would say, hey, you want to grow as a leader, get before God, ask big
Buckle
questions.
up, too.
Buckle up, and say, all right, God, seriously, where do you want me to grow? Where do you want me to grow? Yeah. And let him, process it with him and pick one area. Maybe it's, hey, I need to grow in caring for the souls of my family and my team. Yeah. Maybe it's, I need to grow in my integrity. Maybe it's, hey, I just need to learn how to delegate or, whatever it is. But pick one thing. It's good. Pick one thing. Focus on one thing. We try to diversify our learning too much, and therefore we don't learn. And so what you want to do is you really want to focus your learning. And so then find a resource, a book or something. So pick your one thing you want to grow in, find a resource, find a friend, get together and talk about it.
That's so good.
And you do those, you're going to grow. Yeah. You're going to grow.
And Mac, this is what you teach in Leadership Pipeline. This is how you teach churches to train other leaders is to say, hey, find this resource, walk through it with them and grow together, hold each other accountable to it. Right. And so you're doing that. And so, man, this has been solid gold. So I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks for coming today and investing in us, but also investing in the podcast. Multiplygroup.org, Leadership Pipeline. You're doing this for multiple organizations, not just churches, but organizational levels. You're showing and walking them through processes on how to build leadership pipelines within their organization too. And so leadership cans, just how much, how wide, it's in every facet and every area of our life. And so if we can grow in these areas, then we're going to grow the others around us. We're going to build up other people around us. Thank you for investing in so many leaders. And can I just say this too? You're proud and you admire Brandon. I guarantee God used a lot of that through mom and dad. Yeah. And, and so as you admire him, it's okay to give God some credit to say, thank you for using me, to invest in him. I guarantee you a lot of what Brandon has is because he saw mom and dad doing it. And so we don't get told that a lot. So, but I know that about you because I can see it. I know people that know you well and have been around you for a really long time. And so I guarantee a lot of what he's experiencing now is because he had a very intentional father that cared about leadership, leading in his home, walking with Jesus, and investing in the people that God gave him to lead and elevate them. And so Brandon's elevated right now because of the work that you did. So thank you, Mac, for doing that. Yeah, because he's a blessing to all of us, and that's a part of you as well, too. So, yeah. All right, that's it for this episode of Elevate Your Leadership. Join us next time. We're so grateful to have Mac with us today, and looking forward to elevating your leadership as we continue on in this journey.